Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for making sure that my request is a success. I appreciate that. We are mindful of the time. We are mindful of safety in the city, and therefore we'll stick to the time. We appreciate all of you for coming. My name is Pegi Mngomezulu. I'm the caretaker at Conrad. The boss is CISB. Where is CISB? CISB is our boss, and she is accompanied by a team led by a speaker. Deputy Mayor, we have our own speaker here. We have our speaker there. Speaker, Sugoma Wagbon. That is our speaker. And next to her is our deputy speaker, DS. And then on the far right, we have our own chief whip. And then we have ordinary members. Then I will introduce them as time goes on. Ladies and gentlemen, this year is very interesting. I'm told that we are blessed by some high-profile colleagues who have joined us. We have our deputy mayor here, who is one of our guests today. We really appreciate that, deputy mayor. Normally what happens when we have these events, we invite everyone. By everyone, I mean everyone. But then we are disappointed when politicians don't pitch. So we appreciate it when they do pitch, especially on this topic, because it's a topic that speaks to them. We could have arranged this event on campus, but then we decided that it's a public dialogue, so it must be in the public space. That's why we opted for this place. Now let me do the formalities so that at least I can look formal. I'll start off by greeting the Nelson Mandela community, more especially my ever-capable Conrad staff. These are the people who work around the clock to make things happen at the center. I'm just there as an addition. Otherwise, these are the people who make things happen. I would also like to appreciate the partnership we have with the Herald. Between the two of us, then we organize this event. We really appreciate that. And also the South End Museum staff and the trustees. We've made a good relationship for the years that I've been here, and it's working very well. We also appreciate the presence of our external stakeholders. I understand there are 4 groups from outside the city. We appreciate all of them. Most importantly, our leaders. I don't want to say our future leaders. Whenever we talk about learners, we say our future leaders. These are our leaders, because those of us who are currently leading, we have led them, but we have led them astray. So these are the people who are our leaders, and thank you very much for coming. And then, of course, our esteemed speakers who will be helping us navigate today's topic. We appreciate them honoring our invitation. We are grateful for that. And then, of course, ladies and gentlemen, those who are joining us in person and those who have also joined us through virtual platforms. I've made it a culture that whenever I'm going to talk, even if I'm talking for 2 minutes, I write down what I am going to talk about, particularly because most of the time we are misquoted. And then you are said to have said something you didn't say. So then at least there will be something to refer to. So as you all know, ladies and gentlemen, 2026 is local government election year. The date is set for the 4th of November, for those who didn't know. Political parties have already started announcing their candidates for this very important event. Noticeably, we have 2 groups of people. On the one hand, we have a group I refer to as pensioners, without necessarily being offensive. So we have pensioners on the one hand, and then we have the youth on the other hand. But all of them will be our leaders. We don't know who is going to emerge victorious, but we have that group of people. And then, of course, this year's elections is important because it happens in a couple of contexts. Firstly, recently the IEC released a report about the voter participation survey. One of the key findings that was tabled was that popular support for democracy has gone down. It went down from 65% to 36%. I was privileged to be invited by the IEC when this report was tabled in Johannesburg, and this is very concerning, from 65% to 36%. As to why that is the case, I don't know. Our eminent speakers are going to help us navigate that. Secondly, the 2026 local government election will happen at the time when the country is governed by a 10-member multi-party coalition government, which is usually wrongly referred to as a government of national unity. In isiZulu, there is something we call uhulumeni wobumbano, no hulumeni wokubambisana. Uhulumeni wobumbano is a government of national unity. Uhulumeni wokubambisana is a coalition government. What we have is a coalition government, not a GNU, because there is no party that won the elections. So this coalition was necessitated by the results of the election. I'm not politicking, by the way, I'm just stating facts. And also to make sure that our learners get it right, not to be misled. Thirdly, a newly formed political parties such as AMM, that is Africa Maibuye Movement, MK Party, Rise Mzansi, and a few others, will be participating in this election for the very first time. They only participated in the general election in 2024, and this will be their first local government election, and they will be put to the test. Fourthly, the election will happen as the youth has become a critical vote. In other words, we're wanting to see how the youth is going to vote in this election, because in the past, some of the youngsters have said it's pointless to vote. We vote for party X, there is no service delivery. We vote for party Y, there is no service delivery. Then what's the point? But then others are saying that this is the time that we should vote en masse to make sure that we make a statement. So we'll watch the space. And then lastly, this election will happen as trust deficit between politicians and the electorate has increased significantly, while service delivery has in fact declined. So on the one hand, we have a trust deficit going down. In other words, there is lack of trust between politicians and the electorate. At the same time, service delivery is on the decline. So you then want to make a statement, but do it the right way, through voting and not necessarily making a lot of noise. Amid these different contexts, therefore, Conrad and the Herald proposed the topic for today, which is trust, turnout, and turmoil, factors that will determine the success or failure of political parties in the upcoming 2026 local government election. This is a very strong and very tough topic. Fortunately for me, I'm not the one who's going to unpack it. We have invited 3 eminent speakers who have been cogently thought through. We didn't go to bed, woke up, and then came up with the names. These names were cogently thought through. These individuals have a role to play in the public sphere, and they've made their presence felt in one area or the other. And that is the reason why we brought them here. But before I invite them to join me on the podium, I'm going to invite our senior manager, Prasobs, we call him Prasobs, who is our senior manager for advocacy, education, and training. This is the person who's going to formally welcome us. After he has spoken, we have 2 options: either to take off our jackets and relax, or to pack our bags and go. Over to Prasobs. A round of applause, please.
Mandibulele njengalwazi. Ngekuba ndithi uwagqibile njengoba ndikumamele your opening remarks, you have touched almost on everything that I have jotted down here, but I think just for the formalities, and because I am at your mercy, Prof. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening to the distinguished guests, representatives of political parties that are present here this evening, members of the media, students from the Mandela University and the surrounding higher education institutions, our academics, community leaders, and fellow citizens. On behalf of Nelson Mandela University and partnership with the Herald, it is my honor and a privilege to welcome you to this important community dialogue under the timely and thought-provoking theme, as the Prof had alluded to, trust, turnout, and turmoil, factors that will determine the success or failures of political parties in the upcoming South Africa 2026 local government election. We gather here not merely to discuss politics, but to reflect on the state of our democracy, the confidence of our people in public institutions, and the future direction of local governance in South Africa. Local government is the sphere of government closer to the people. It is where citizens experience democracy most directly, through service delivery, accountability, safety, infrastructure, housing, jobs, and dignity. The upcoming 2026 local government elections, therefore, represent more than a political context. They are a critical test of public trust and democratic participation. Across South Africa, many communities are asking difficult but necessary questions. Do citizens trust political institutions? That is one question. Will voter turnout increase or decrease, as alluded by Prof. Ngomezulu? So will it increase or it will decline? Can political leadership respond meaningfully to the everyday struggles of ordinary citizens? And what happens if frustration continues to grow unchecked? These are not abstract questions. They reflect every municipality, every ward, and every household. As a university that carries the name of Nelson Mandela, as the Nelson Mandela University, we remain committed to creating spaces of robust, respectful, evidence-based public engagement. Dialogues such as this one strengthen democratic culture by encouraging informed participation, active citizenship, and constructive debate. So tonight's conversations comes at a defining moment in our country's democratic journey. South Africans are increasingly demanding ethical leadership, transparency, service delivery, and genuine accountability. Political parties, civil society, the media, academia, and communities alike all have a role to play in shaping the future we want. Therefore, to our panelists and speakers, thank you for lending your expertise and insights to this important conversation. To everyone attending in person and virtually, thank you for being part of a dialogue that seeks not only to analyze our political landscape, but also to strengthen our democracy. May tonight's discussion be honest, insightful, and impactful. Ngalo mazwi ndiyabulela ndifuna ukuthi ke wonke umuntu wamkelekile. Thank you so much. Back to you, Prof.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Prasobs. Luckily, we can then relax. I thought he was going to say we are not welcome here. So he says we are all welcome, so it means therefore we can then relax. Apart from Deputy Mayor, I'm told that we have representatives from the ANC, we have representatives from Freedom Front Plus. If there are other parties that are represented, my colleagues can notify me as we proceed. As I said, ladies and gentlemen, we are mindful of the time, we are mindful of safety, and therefore we'll cut to the chase. We have 3 speakers, and I will invite them to come to the podium. We decided not to read their bios, just to save time. So each of them will be given about 15 minutes to give us their initial thoughts on the topic, and then we'll engage them. I will start engaging them, and then after that, it will be open to the public. May I say up front that when the time comes for you to engage the speakers, you don't deliver another speech. This is not a rally. This is not a church where you can preach. So then you just prepare your questions. When the time comes, you go straight to the question and then wait for their responses. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let me call Usis Yandisa Jubase, who is from Eastern Cape Outreach Office of the National Youth Development Agency, commonly known as NYDA. A round of applause, please. Thank you very much. And then the second speaker is someone who is bringing us 2 things. I had a chat with him outside, and we agreed that we are not going to use the definition they normally give for GP. When people say GP, they say gangster's paradise, when in fact it should be Gauteng province. They say gangster's paradise. So he promised me that Joburg is known for two things. One is money, the other one is meat. So if he doesn't give us any of the two, then we're going to hold him hostage and it doesn't go back to Johannesburg. Professor Mcebisi Jonas is, not Mcebisi Jonas, Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana is a political scientist based at the University of Johannesburg. Over to you, Prof. Thank you very much. Yeah, there are so many Mcebisi, so I confuse you for another one. Okay, then the last speaker will be Professor Jolene Steyn-Kotze, who is a Chief Research Specialist from the Human Sciences Research Council, commonly known as HSRC, one of the organizations that assisted in doing the survey, which came to the conclusion that we have a lot of work to do as a country. Over to you, Prof. A round of applause, please. Thank you very much. I'm a Zulu, and my first language is isiZulu. But then when I went to school, I was told that there is an English phrase that you bail the cat. I don't know what you bail the cat. So I want to check who is going to bail the cat. I'm a democratic facilitator. Let me check. Who is going to bail the cat? Okay, Sis Chubase will bail the cat. So each of them will be given about 15 minutes to introduce the topic, and then once they've spoken, I will first engage them for a few minutes, and then the floor will be yours. Thank you very much. Over to Ms. Chubase. A round of applause, please.
Thank you very much to our democratic facilitator, Prof. Mgobe Zulu. Greetings to everyone present here today, to my fellow panelists, to the university leadership, the deputy mayor present amongst us today, leadership from various political parties, the Herald newspaper and the media present. And I'd like to greet the students, the heartbeat of the university, and I'd like to greet everyone present here from our communities. As it's already been said, my name is Yandisa, my surname is Chubase. I work for the National Youth Development Agency. Thank you once again to both teams, CANRAD and the Herald, for inviting me to this platform. It is indeed an honor. The topic today is trust, turnout, and turmoil. Factors that will cause the success and the failure of political parties in the upcoming local government elections. Colleagues, we gather here today to reflect and to think together some of the factors that will determine the success of political parties in the upcoming 2026 local government elections. This elections comes at a time when our country is both maturing, our democracy is both maturing, but ultimately being put to its ultimate test. It's taking place in a context where the credibility of public institutions is increasingly questioned, where voter confidence in democracy and those who represent democratic institutions is at a historical low. Young people are often described as apathetic towards voting, while older participation is gradually declining. At the same time, social issues such as economic freedom and social mobility have become more and more urgent. The cost of living is rising. The middle class is drowning in debt. And small and medium enterprises are struggling to remain viable due to poor infrastructure and insufficient support. Our society is becoming increasingly violent, and one could argue that this country is indeed a ticking time bomb. The 2024 elections demonstrated that the trajectory of our democracy has fundamentally changed. The era of outright majority rule is no longer guaranteed. Instead, we have entered into a phase characterized by coalition politics, culminating in now we call the government of national unity, as Prof has ultimately corrected us to say it's coalition. Importantly, this model was first tested in the local government sphere through coalition government. Nelson Mandela Bay Metropolitan Municipality being one such example. The reality begs the question, what ought to be done? How should political parties engage voters? And what factors will determine their success or their demise in this election? I believe there are several key factors to consider, but I'll just take a few. I'm amongst professors here, so I'll just take a few. But I think number one is campaign approach and strategy. Political parties must confront the reality that traditional campaign methods are no longer sufficient, particularly in urban areas and amongst young voters. Conventional approaches such as door-to-door campaign will not be enough on their own. Campaign strategies in urban areas cannot mirror those in rural communities. Social media platforms have become powerful spaces of shaping public opinion. They influence voter perceptions, and even a simple hashtag can spark a widespread activism. We've seen over the years, I think if we take recent years, Fees Must Fall started off as a hashtag, and it blew up the country. Recently, we had the purple hashtag, everyone changing their profile pictures to purple, because we are standing in solidarity of young people or people who have suffered gender-based violence and femicide. There are many hashtag revolutions that we have had. And if political parties successfully leverage these platforms and convert online engagement to actual votes, they're likely then to gain advantage. Importantly, the IEC has reported that in its online voter registration platform that it recently launched before the 2024 national elections, has gained strong traction amongst young people. In one of the major registration drives, young voters between the age of 16 to 29 accounted for over 78% of new registrations. More than 445,000 individuals were demonstrated their support for this digital engagement. The middle class, meanwhile, is often disengaged from traditional political outreach and requires a more targeted and issue-based engagement strategies. The middle class is busy, the middle class is tired, the middle class is stretched. Now, if you are going to campaign like you are going to expect a middle class person who clocks in 8 to 5 on most days to go to a rally, then it is likely not going to work. So then we need to start thinking about how then do we really start engaging and relating to this type of voter. Number 2, addressing basic service delivery needs. I think this one is very obvious. One key lesson that the ordinary South African wants is just the ordinary things to function effectively. Citizens want to see their hard-earned taxes. They want to see where they go. They want to drive on roads without potholes, have access to running water, and receive reliable basic services. Efficiency, or the lack thereof, remains one of the biggest weaknesses in government departments and municipalities. Political parties that convincingly demonstrate their ability to deliver efficiently will resonate with voters. Mobilization of the youth vote. Young people in this election are critical. The people that are sitting here, the students, You are critical in deciding where this country is going in this local government election. The lack of youth representation in councils and parliament contributes significantly to the disengagement of young people. Many young people do not see themselves reflected in decision-making structures that govern their daily lives. Political parties that prioritize young councillor candidates, both ward and PR candidates, are more likely to spark a renewed interest because young people can therefore resonate with their peers. Radical, but yet practical economic policy. I think in this country we talk a lot, rhetoric. Economic freedom in our lifetime, true, correct. But there is a pressing need for bold but realistic economic policy that addresses lived realities of citizens. The cost of living crisis continues to deepen, and the structural inequalities remain highly visible. Many South Africans do not see the direct link or correlation between them casting their vote and the improvements in their daily lives. As some voters often say, voting does not change the price of bread. Unemployment remains a major crisis, particularly among the youth, and economic opportunities are limited. Political parties that can bridge the gap between policy and tangible outcomes will then gain credibility and support. Skills revolution, and this one is my last one, is the new buzzword. If you go anywhere and listen to the politicians lately, we talk about skills revolution. Now, we must practicalize what the skills revolution looks like, right? We need to better align our education system with the demands of the economy. Now, to have a skills revolution, you must invest in institutions, TVET colleges that produce a skills-based type of leadership, right? Now, if we are going to talk about a skills revolution, every revolution, by the way, at some point is funded. Now, we need to redirect our fiscal policy to where it matters, and that is where the skills revolution is going to start. Now, my closing thought, or rather as I land, ultimately, the success or failure of political parties in the 2026 local government elections will depend on their ability to adapt to the changing political landscape, rebuilding trust, and responding meaningfully to the lived realities of South Africans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sis. Wow, thank you very much, Ms. Chubas. You painted the picture, you identified challenges, but you also provided advice or solutions. Thank you very much for that. I'm not going to summarize what the speakers are saying. I will allow them to present, and then we'll engage. And then, meanwhile, you are jotting down your questions. I will go straight to Professor Ndletyana, who is going to take his 15 minutes introductory remarks. Over to you, Prof. A round of applause, please.
To the Arsenal fans in the house, up the Gunners. I'm going to focus specifically on this metro. We haven't caucused, so I'm not sure what Jolene is going to look at. But I'm going to look specifically at this metro. I'm very interested in this metro. This is my home, which is partly the reason why I'm happy to be here. I'm going to time myself 15 minutes. There is causality between trust and turnout. Trust means credibility, believability. Do voters believe that leaders will honor their promises? Will the municipality perform optimally? Will they respond to people's needs and all that? So if people believe, trust that leaders do as they promise, municipality works as they ought to, then they come back to vote. But before voting, they look back at the record. What have you done for me lately? In the last few years, since 2021. They look at that record, it's an evaluation of sorts. So the level of trust then depends on how they have performed previously. It's earned, it's based on something. It's not just something that people make up. And people believe, so this is a social contract. We vote, you promise us, you come to campaign. You promise us A, B, C, and D. We vote for you, believing that you will do what you have promised that you will do. And the municipality will perform these duties and perform them in a fair way, equally, and in a dignified way based on our foundational values. Because as a country with public institutions, there are laws, there are values, there are ethics that ought to be followed. So these are expectations from voters. We judge you based on what we know, what we've been promised, what we know. So trust then is then determined on the basis of that. What I'm going to do here is also to look into my crystal ball and look, but sometimes I do feel like I'm going to look into my crystal ball, not so much at the bones, but at empirical evidence of the last few years, and ask myself, what does this portend for the 5th of November 2026? What are we likely to see the following day after voting? So my hunch is as follows on turnout, is that turnout is going to be extremely slow. By the way, I'm focusing on PE. Then I'll entertain questions on the rest of the country during Q&A. Turnout is going to be extremely low because the current term has been atrocious. Remember I said turnout is determined by trust. I trust that my vote will mean something. And for me to make that determination, I look at past performance. But past performance does not inspire confidence. So I no longer trust. I withdraw. Turnout is going to be quite low. Performance has been bad at an individual level as well as the municipal level. At a personal level, individual level, the mayor, who's the face of council, the face of government, has been embroiled in a number of issues that do not inspire confidence, that taint the reputation and believability, credibility of the mayor. Deposits of cashes into her account seem to suggest that they came from elsewhere other than her own employment. It raises questions, what are these things? Are these bribes or what are they? I don't know, I'm in PE, I'm at Joburg, so I don't know what explanation she has given. I haven't heard anything. So there are lingering suspicion about where does the mayor get this money. Her accounts are frozen, and on top of that, there are deals about transformers being given to private companies, arrangements that are not approved by the municipality. So this is conduct that is beyond the normal. It raises questions about the credibility and integrity of the mayoral office. The portfolio committee, as we have heard, Mkhize was here, who also has his own problems, by the way, but is now acting in a somewhat credible manner, I guess. But he also has the vibes thing, I can't remember the full name. But for now, Mkhize has been doing what looks like to be a good job. calling the municipality to account on a number of things. And the conclusion of the portfolio committee is that your mayor is dishonest. Your mayor lacks decorum. Those are the two things. She doesn't respond to questions. She doesn't submit papers. She gives half answers to questions. It's like she's not in the office. It's like she's not present, right? This is a conclusion. This is what we hear. This is the impression that we hear. This is what we read about your mayoral leadership. Then you have the chief of staff writing a full letter confirming, it's true. She lacks work ethic on top of that. So this is the leadership that you have. These are things that we hear about the mayor of this metro. And what you hear creates an impression. It tells you about the kind of person that you are dealing with. It forms part of the evaluation. Because you don't know this person, obviously. So your impression of the person is formed by what you hear about the person. But in addition to what you hear about the personality, you have all these things that we hear about the municipality. The municipality. We have floods. It rains heavily. And houses are flooded. And in some instances, people die. Property is destroyed. Destroyed because the water is not flowing into the drains. The drains are not working. So the water is not flowing into the drains. The plan is designed in a way that a street has a drain so that it drains, the water goes into the drain. But if the drain is not clean, then the water can't flow. It builds up, builds up, builds up, builds up, then to a point where it gets into people's houses. Some of them have died. Property has been destroyed. And yet, it's not a strange thing. We know that at a certain time we have rains, and we know the function of drains. And we know that we have to clean drains specifically to avoid flooding. So there are people supposedly who know about, even my own grandmother who had Standard 1 knew about these things. So you expect a lot better from leaders of a municipality with a budget, a whole unit, infrastructure unit or whatever it's called, sanitation unit. They've employed the whole unit. Staff, they get salaries to clean the drains, but they don't clean the drains. They don't clean them. And as a result of that, people die. So this is what the municipality, which is supposed, as you and I know, to treat us equally in a decent manner. That's what the Constitution says. That's what I expect of them. They are failing me on that. The substations are not serviced. The pylons, electricity pylons are falling, and everybody sees them. It becomes a fascinating topic of discussion. Have you seen the pole lately? It's almost, it doesn't get fixed. It doesn't get fixed. It's a topic of amusement. Then it falls, and everybody pretends that, oops, it will. It has fallen, and you have outages. It was never stopped before it fell. The substations were not serviced. People are plunged into darkness. Monies are not being spent to provide the infrastructure for water. Monies are returned back to Treasury. I mean, these things are extraordinary. Extraordinary. And these are basics, ABC, basics, elementary stuff of how you run a government. You know what you need to do. But these things are not happening in this metro. And these are things that we don't just hear about, especially you. This is your lived experience. And you have crime as a last point on that score. At some point, there was a contract issued for CCTV cameras to monitor crime and detect crime and da-da-da-da. That thing got caught up in all the wrangling within the council, and yet people are being kidnapped. People are dying. When everybody knows what has to be done. So this lived experience, based on the reports about the mayoral leadership, based on the lived experience of how the municipality functions, inevitably leads to a point where we no longer trust. They don't care. How else do you believe that they care when you have seen the opposite? That abakatali. And you have ample evidence of that. So this lack of trust that they care will inevitably lead to a low turnout. Why should I bother? They don't give a damn. So there will be a low turnout in this election, that's my sense, because of everything else that I've said. But the low turnout will not play out evenly throughout the metro. I think it will be highest in ANC constituencies, in the townships particularly, because those are people that are most disappointed. It might be higher or stay the same amongst whites and colored voters. The DA supporters are enthused. They are quite keen to remove the ANC. And their campaign elsewhere has been quite good in Johannesburg, in Cape Town, and they've elected a new leader. So the party is on a new path. So they're quite excited, but they face very tough competition from Patriotic Alliance. Patriotic Alliance, especially colored voters, who for quite some time have been feeling marginalized. They look at PA's Gayton Mackenzie as a messiah. He's some kind of a messianic figure. You know, when people give up on institutions, on fair treatment, when they feel that they are no longer cared for, they become vulnerable. They give up on the values because foundational values, democracy, civic values, you have to trust that you'll be treated equally because you are a citizen. So it's kind of tangible. It's based on the values that we share the same kind of values. It's a little bit, the ties and obligations are a little bit intangible. It means we have to believe on the same thing, that we are equal and I'm your brother's keeper. That you think I matter too. 15 minutes is done, but I'll take 3 more minutes. So, however, what has happened in the last few years is that the colored folks in this part of the country and elsewhere in the country have felt marginalized. So what they have done, they no longer believe in the values, they believe in blood, kinfolk ties. So they've now shifted away from thinking that we all matter to thinking that we have to vote for one of our own. Gary is here, his party is also for coloreds. He will respond later on if he wants to. Mackenzie is the same thing. At least Mackenzie was quite upfront about it, that this is a party for coloreds. So for colored folks who feel overlooked by the ANC, they're like, no, F this ANC. It's for blacks. They are not paying attention to us. So we need to trust our own. That's what happens when there is a betrayal of civic values. There's no trust in the values. So we trust people of our own. So there's a resort to primordial identity. One of my own, kinfolk, right? Because the idea that we all matter as individuals has proven to be false. So we have to explore something else. It means let go for someone who looks like me. Mackenzie is a colored fellow who looks like me. He speaks Afrikaans. He's made it in the colored community, so people are in awe, right? And they believe that he's the one person because everything else has not worked. Desperation. You look for something that works. And what promises the possibility of a solution are kinfolk ties, identity. So Mackenzie is likely to do relatively well somewhere there. That's where the DA is unlikely to do well because it faces a strong competition. The DA used to be quite strong in the colored community here, but I think that competition from Mackenzie is going to be quite tough. And those who will stay away from the ANC is going to be hardest hit, as I said, are unlikely to vote for any other party. Most of our voters are exiters. They are not switchers. They exit. They don't switch to another party. Partly because there aren't many alternatives currently. Rise Mzansi is not there. Action SA, Trolip is a national leader. He's not on the ground. AIM is also not doing well. Gary's party has been fraught with internal struggle. It might not come back. Gary might not come back as a councillor next year because they've been fighting all the time. And the EFF started off, the EFF was quite good as an opposition. Quite good as an opposition. It had a program demanding certain things from the municipality. But now, as part of government, they seem to have been disoriented. They've lost their ways. They've been swallowed up by government. And what has been happening with the party is that you've had national news, really. Malema firing Floyd, Malema swearing at Ndlozi's wife, Malema kicking out Ndlozi, Malema's problems. It's been consumed by personal problems. There isn't a program. The party has failed completely to define a program for itself in this term. So that is why I feel it will not do well. Lastly, Peggy, before Ungqosh. Lastly, AIM, AIC, and National Alliance are unlikely to return in the next council because of the performance of the parties. Fundamentally, people evaluate what have you done. And I don't think any of these parties have a credible record to show. And just in case, given that the ANC says people can be appointed from outside to become their mayoral candidate, the only rescue, silver lining, potential silver lining for the ANC is if it gets some exciting person from outside, because what they have now at Matomela House is deadwood. If they get someone outside, they might just be saved. Otherwise, as things stand, they are likely to go even further down. Thank you.
You know, I get excited when someone bases an argument on facts and it's not me. Because whenever I do it, people say, this is the Zuma guy. We have heard that. Someone called me this morning and said, you know what? I've been watching things on social media. Luckily, I'm not a social media person. I've been watching things on social media. Whenever you are on TV, on radio, or you are writing opinion pieces, people say, Ngomezulu is a Zuma guy. Okay, on which facts? None. You just hear people say it and then you say it because it sounds good. But I'm not there. Prof, it's your turn now. Prof Steenkotze will take her 15 minutes and then we'll start engaging. Over to you, Prof. A round of applause, please.
Thank you, Mr. Bisi. I charge interest for the 2 minutes. Thank you, yes. We go according to my watch. Thank you to our 2 speakers beforehand who just shared with me. I lectured her in her first year. I remain forever young at heart, slightly older in other places. So what I'm going to talk about today, because it's quite tough following on 2 very informative and very thought-provoking speeches. So what is it that I can share that would be of interest or would bring value to our discussion around trust, turmoil, and turnout? And I don't know if anybody has picked up that it is 30 years of the South African Constitution this year. 30 years, yes, 30 years. So we have 30 years of the 1996 Act 108 that all of the students quote, possibly in many of their assignments. And when you start looking at why is this important? Because if we look at the South African Constitution, initially it brought a political promise. It brought a promise around what life would look like under democratic rule. The dream of 94, if you will, right? We had a bouquet of political rights, a bouquet of socioeconomic rights, we have environmental rights, we have all of these rights and obligations that would color the life that we will have under democracy. The one thing we don't talk about, however, when we start talking about institutions, rules, the dream of 94, the Constitution, is political parties. Because ultimately, political parties are the custodians of that constitutional dream. We go out, we elect political parties. That means we give our consent through the vote to say, you may govern us. We also, through giving our vote, through giving the consent, say, you have the authority to make decisions on our behalf. So ultimately, if you think about it, political parties are the custodians of that promise of a better life. How many of you know the Constitution? How many of you don't know the Constitution? Nobody wants to answer the question. For many South Africans, the Constitution remains this abstract idea, right? Some idea idealized somewhere. When, in fact, the Constitution is a living and breathing document that tells us how political parties should behave, how they should treat the consent that we as the electorate give them. So we went around, and I'm going to share hopefully some interesting statistics with you, but we went around in 2024 across the country. We ran a national survey that's representative of the population, and we wanted to know a few things. Amongst them, what we wanted to know is, as you had mentioned, the demand for democracy. Right? So to what extent do South Africans hold a demand for democracy? And if you track it between 2014 and this data that I'm presenting here is up to 2023, you will see that there has been a significant decline in the demand for democracy. Or people who felt that for someone like me, it doesn't matter what kind of government we have, increased from 23% in 2014 to 41% in 2022. For South Africans who were open to non-democratic forms of government, in 2014, 15% of the population would have been open to non-democratic forms of government as preferable, and that spiked between 2021 and 2022 to around 23 to 20% of the population. Similarly, democracy is preferable to any other kind of government. 57% of the population thought democracy was preferable in 2014, and 44% thought democracy was preferable in 2023, over a 10-year period. And we have to start asking why. Because as the demand for democracy has been declining, so too has political trust. I wonder if I should ask the question, who's the least trusted political institution in the country? Nobody wants to venture a guess here.
Local government.
Local government, no. No, it's politicians. Politicians and political parties are one of the least trusted institutions in the country. Coupled with that, political parties, political affinity, how close do you feel to a political party? Right now, if people sitting here, if you had to think, yo, I really like that political party, I got like, no takers, none. We call that political affinity. Political affinity has been on the decline, along with trust, along with voter turnout. So when we start looking at these dynamics, a decline in demand for democracy, a decline in political trust, a decline in political affinity, what is it that we are looking at? And in order to answer that question, myself and a number of my colleagues went tracking around the entire of South Africa, and we conducted quite a few focus groups in different communities. I had the great privilege of doing focus groups here in Zwede, in KwaZakele, in Motherwell, in Walmer Township, in Buffelsfontein, in Central, all across the city. And the same story kept popping up at each and every single focus group. Democracy doesn't deliver. And what was quite interesting was, and I feel pressurized stating this finding, there's a lot of young people here, including myself. Remember, young at heart, slightly older in other places. But the one thing that struck me was older people tended to withdraw from the political process. Oh, I'm not going to vote, my life doesn't change. Or I have to vote because I have to get a grant, or I have to get something. Younger people, however, were far more open to bargaining with their vote. In fact, there was one very, very passionate lady sitting in one of our focus groups that tried to convince her elders that for 1 year they need to vote EFF. For the next year, they need to vote ANC for the next election. After that election, they need to vote DA. They need to keep all the political parties on their toes to make sure that for that period of 5 years, they do perform. And those were the stories that communities were telling. They were telling stories of disillusionment, that democracy hasn't delivered, that my life economically has not gotten better. And we asked in one of our survey questions, how has your life changed for you and your family since 1994? The options were better, the same, or worse. Less than half of South Africans said their lives had gotten better. That's 45% of the sample, or of the population. For 24%, it was the same, and 28% of South Africans said their lives had gotten worse for them and their families since 1994. So, with that said, we heard some discussions around credibility, around trusting, accountability, around doing what we do. Ultimately, and I want to take Msebisi's point a little bit further, is that people must also believe in the authority of the rules and the ability of the system to deliver on something, right? So if we are going to go out and vote on elections or vote in elections, is the act of voting worthy of people's time? Lots of people are not looking at me right now. And the question is a little bit loaded, because ultimately, if we look at democracy, and democracy is a system, it is a system that distributes certain outcomes. In our case, it is to distribute social, political, and economic goods for the betterment of society so that we can reach the dream of 1994. It needs to support the outcome of a just society. And political parties are the custodians of getting us to that just society. But when you hear stories, and by the way, I was without power for 15 days when the pylon fell. So when you hear stories around water not being delivered, healthcare undermining the quality of life of ordinary South Africans, or you hear stories around housing crises. We conducted a focus group in Motherwell, and we were sitting in a church that was constructed from a number of roof sheets. A big church. And the irony for me stood out. We were talking about the dream of 94 in a constructed building by the community themselves with very little support from the government. We need to start looking at political parties more seriously, not as a, oh, look what that political party did and becoming the next meme or becoming the, but we seriously need to look at what is the role of political parties in advancing a democratic society as we move forward in the future. Because ultimately, for the youth sitting here, myself included, we need to look at South Africa not now, but South Africa 50 years from now. What policies are political parties putting in place when they are in government? And what impact will that policy have 50 years down the line? And those are important considerations, because if we are going to say that we need to produce outcomes to support a just society, we do need to start having a conversation in what role political parties play in shaping who gets what, where, and how. I also think that we need to start radically changing the political culture around political parties, and not the way people view political parties, but rather the political culture within these parties themselves. The way political parties look at the electorate, the way political parties engage one another. Over the last few elections, the electorate has been very clear. A coalition government has been established. Note coalition. Just saying. A coalition government has been established. That means that of the electorate who is still engaging in the system, and that number is getting smaller and smaller and smaller at each election, but of the people still engaging, the mandate is clear. We want political parties to work together to solve our massive deficit in the socio-economic issues we need to address. But political parties, instead of adopting a politics of collaboration, end up adopting an antagonistic politics, a politics where they cannot necessarily work together, and often political outcomes count more than the service delivery constitutional requirements that political parties need to advance when they are in position of power. So I want to take it a step further, because if we say that we want people to believe in the authority of the rules, of the Constitution, of the institutions, of have respect, then we also need to flip it around and say that the custodians of those institutions also need to believe in the authority and the consent of the broader public that had put them there in the first place. My crystal ball is always broken. Always. And I got this question a little earlier on. Who's going to win? I don't know. For me, it's a question of numbers. I'm claiming my interest. For me, it's a question of numbers. Because ultimately, when political parties go to the polls in this coming election, they are no longer they are no longer going to have to convince Becky to vote for me. In fact, I'm going to have to convince Becky why he should go and vote in the first place. And if I have convinced him that he should go out and vote, and he actually goes out and votes, I am not sure that he is indeed going to vote for me. So there is a lot of work to be done. I don't have a big, fancy conclusion, unfortunately, because the answers are open-ended. The only thing I can say is that when political parties do go out and campaign, there is a responsibility to talk about the inherent good that comes from a democratic system of government where we have a voice, and not necessarily try and build on performance-based legitimacy to earn votes. And note I said votes, not trust.
Thanks, Prof. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much to our esteemed colleagues. Let us give the Herald and Conrad a round of applause for selecting the most suitable speakers for this talk. A round of applause, please. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. As I said, I'm not going to summarize, but basically, Ms. Chubase represented the youth in a way, because she touched on a number of issues that the youth is interested in, and therefore provided some pointers as to what to look for in this forthcoming election. Obviously, starting with registration. You cannot vote if you have not registered. So it starts there. And then she made a couple of points which are factors that will determine the way to go, whether you go up or you go down. It will depend on some of those factors. And then Prof. Ndletyana did a case study of Gqeberha, and some of the issues, in fact, most of the issues he spoke to are issues we all know. When I make a turn from work, when I make a turn to where I live, a place I call my shack, my temporal shack, my home is in KZN, what I have here is a shack. So when I make a turn going to my shack, after just a rain that took about 10, 15 minutes, I can hardly see where the road is because of flooding. And imagine if it were to rain for a week, what would happen? Luckily, when it rained endlessly, I was in KZN, so I missed it. All right, so but basically, the issues was talking about are practical issues that you are familiar with. And then Prof. Steyn is looking at issues from a national point of view and looking at the views out there as to what people are thinking and what people have come up with when they compare the then and now. Then the big question is, in future, where will this country be, given the state in which it is currently? So I'm not going to summarize everything. I will then spend just a few minutes engaging them while you prepare your questions. According to the program, I will engage them just very briefly, and then please prepare your questions. And then you have a question, and then you tell us who you are, not where you come from, where to eat, and so on and so forth. Just your name and then your question. Now, let me engage my speakers here. Can you please assist me with the roving mic? Okay, it's coming. All right. We have heard what our speakers have said. I will start with you, Ms. Jubase. We have heard what our speakers have said. And then for you, Ms. Jubase, I have a pointed question here. And
Yes.
I deliberately selected specific political parties. Let me start with you, Ms. Jubase. What do you consider to be the ANC strengths and weaknesses going to this year's election? The ANC in particular, its strengths and its weaknesses. Just maybe one or two strengths and one or two weaknesses, then I'll move on.
All right. I think the ANC's strength has always been that it has pro-poor policies, right? So things like RDP, things like NSFAS, things like can be attributed to the African National Congress, right? So that has always been its strength, and I think this is why it does well even in rural areas because of the pro-poor policies that it has. The weaknesses of the ANC, I think are culminative, right? But I think it is number one, is that it's associated mostly with elders, right? I think there's a very big perception around ANC, old people sleeping in parliament, and all of that, all of those issues, right? So I think the ANC needs to then, if it has any, fight, one of the fighting chances is that it must strongly in this election really, really center young people. I think two, I think obviously, service delivery issues, are very at the center because in most municipalities, particularly in the Eastern Cape, it's the ANC that's at the center. So the efficiency of administration, government officials and all of that, right? And I think it's just going through a lot of, it needs a really, really big, I wish it could get a spinster, like a media spinster, because the perception, and because of very real facts, and its weaknesses are there. So I just think in this election, they need a media guru that can really, really, turn it around for them. But on a practical level, I just think it's, out of many weaknesses, those are the two that I think I can account for.
Thank you very much. A round of applause, please. Okay, I'll come to you, Prof. I deliberately planned these questions this way. And then I'll come back to you, Prof. Ndlekana. Let me go to you, Prof. Steenkotze. In your view, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the Democratic Alliance?
I was cheating and I read your paper. So I saw that one coming. Ultimately, I think when you start looking at strengths and weaknesses of political parties, one can do it from a policy perspective and really look at what some of the key policy platforms are. But one also needs to take it a little bit further and look at some of the, I would say, softer challenges. So for me, there are some strong policies in terms of getting municipalities to work on the one hand. But I also do think that in getting municipalities to work, you often find some deficits in the governance of municipalities, let's put it that way. Campaigning-wise, I think that we have seen Helen Zille swim. We have seen Helen Zille canoe, or what is it, rubber duck, what do you call it? Yeah, whatever. But we have seen her do all of these wonderful things, which is a strength, because the one thing that's what you do is you start engaging South Africans kind of in the campaign, right? However, I still find the DA's campaign to be somewhat reactive around, focusing too much on what the failure deliveries are instead of pushing forward what some of their successes are. And lastly, the DA has done a very, very good job on the campaign trail of also highlighting its gems. Cape Town, the city of Cape Town initially, right? And then it was the Western Cape province. I think what nobody is really paying enough attention to is the DA in the national government, specifically with the outbreak of foot and mouth disease, and how that could better have been handled.
Applause for Prof. Thank you very much, Prof. Steenkotze. Prof. Nlekyana, given the many new political parties, and we still have more mushrooming, by the way, before the election. So given the many new political parties that will participate in this year's election for the very first time, what are their strengths and their weaknesses compared to traditional political parties?
Well, I'm not sure of the new ones. So it puts me at a disadvantage in terms of a comparative value. But generally, I mean, there's a party that has just been established here. It's also a colored party, apparently. Then the field is flooded. You have the PA, you have the NA, you have this other party, and they don't really offer much in terms of difference. In terms of the latest new parties, you have Rise, Maibuye Floyd's party, for instance. The problem there, I mean, you know, parties, establishing a party is a difficult undertaking. You need to find people who are genuinely interested in the party. They are not just looking for a job. Many townships are full of hustlers. They promise you all sorts of things, will get you support, but they never bring up that support. All they want is money, and branches are never established. So for me, by the way, I was part of the panel of that was established just recently by Parliament to propose new electoral laws, which was chaired by Advocate Richard Sizani. I was the chief researcher and the writer of the report, which report is now in front of Parliament. And one of the key issues that came out there is that it's something that you and I have studied, have been worried about, which is the fragmentation of the party system. Fragmentation, the rise of frivolous parties. Of course, you do want to promote a multi-party democracy, but they're just parties that are meaningless. So one of the things that came up was that you need to think of a threshold, a legal threshold. Parties that get below 1% don't get seats. Because you want consolidation. You want consolidation, you also want... the electorate is bombarded with lots and lots of messages, and some of these messages are just the same. So there's a level of saturation that some of these parties are just unnecessary. So the proposal there in the report is that 1%, if you get 1% and below, then you're out. You won't get any seats. And other parties, other countries have been quite harsh on this. 2%, 3%. I think Germany is 5% or something like that. Primarily because you want to make sure that you have, especially now in the age of coalitions, you want to make sure that you have in your coalition, you have biggest parties who have a stake in the system. I'm not sure how much time I have to add this one more detail, Becky.
You are at the mercy of the facilitator. Your time is up, but you can finish, Prof.
Okay. I have been part of an initiative, a civil society initiative in the city with Advocate Piccoli, Tozamile Bota, Professor Bani Pityana, and Mongameli Peter. And this initiative has been convened by Mongameli Peter, civil society leader. And the idea, from the very beginning, we realized that the only coalition in this city that can work is one that includes the ANC and the DA. Two biggest parties. They each represent a major constituency. The ANC has its own leaders who are completely insensitive to how the other side of town lives. Their constituencies generally township folks. And they have this prejudice and ignorance about how business functions and life in the suburbia. And there's an element of populism that leads to posturing and to disregard of the business. Soon after 2021, we've been pushing this thing. We had lots of meetings with the DA people, with the ANC people, Helen Zille and everybody, ANC provincial Calata House people. And it looked like they were moving towards this idea. But it just fell apart. At some point, the DA also was a spoiler because the MEC Zolile at Bishop MEC of local government wanted to inaugurate an EXCO model here. An EXCO which would have meant that the DA and the ANC would be dominant parties. But the DA felt that because Odendal was mayor at the time, so he felt that this was the ANC's way of getting the DA out. So he kind of resisted that, even though in our informal meeting, this is something I've written about in my columns and everything else. In our informal meetings, there was some general agreement about this idea that for the stability and effectiveness of a coalition in this city, you need to get two major parties who have the greatest to lose. Once we get both of them in, then you are good. So the other small parties are just spoilers in my view, and that's something I can say anywhere, anytime.
Thank you very much for that, Prof. A round of applause for Prof. Okay, I'll reserve the reflective comments later. For now, the floor is yours. I'm left-handed, so I don't want to be accused of being biased. So I'm not starting from my left, I'll start from my right. So I'll start from this row. I need a maximum of 3 hands here. Let me first note them. I have 1, 2, 3, or 4, or I'll take 4. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Please know your number. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I'll come to this side. I'm here. I'll start with this one. Yeah. Sorry, Kate, was your hand up or were you indicating that you have a mic? It was up. Okay. Okay, we can start, Chief.
1, 2. Okay. Good evening to the panelists and to everyone. My name is Lesa Kanyakhala. I've got a question from all the panelists. Based on Ms. Yandisa Jubase, can voting system be technically secure but still be disrupted by the public? If yes, why? And to Professor Ms. Ndlejana, is high turnout always a sign of a health election, or can it be forced or manipulated? How do turnout rates vary across the demographics, and what does that reveals about the inclusion or disenfranchisement? Based on Professor Jolene Stanley Coetzee, if I'm pronouncing it right, okay. If you could fix one of the three of the South Africans' election, would you choose trust, turnout, or the turmoil reduction, and why? Thank you.
Number two, have you got the questions? Okay, so thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Katlego Mofokeng, and first, I want to start with a quote. The old world was dying. The new world is struggling to be born. This is the time of the monsters. The last time somebody mentioned 30 years, we were speaking of 30 years of democracy. And it had been said for the longest time that look at what we've achieved in this long democracy that we have. And the same thing is being said, look at what we've achieved with this constitution. This constitution, however, doesn't cover a multi-party coalition. It doesn't look at the executive function when there is a multi-party coalition. What happens then when we have hung councils like that those that we have here in the Bay, where people are facing interpersonal issues instead of actually focusing on what it is that they're here to do, and that is advancing the needs of the people that they're representing. So more often than not, we're seeing that these political parties are mainly moving a chessboard, making moves on a chessboard, but are not considering the needs of the people that they themselves are supposed to be representing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Deputy Mayor here.
Good evening, all. Good evening to the panelists as well. I must say that I found the comments very interesting from the panelists, but I must also add that when Prof. Nkebesi's 15 minutes ran out, that is where he should have stopped. Prof, I'm going to remind you, in 2021, you also made predictions, correct? As to what the possible outcomes are going to be in this very metro of yours, Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. And one of your predictions were that my party, of which I'm president, were going to have no representation in council. And I always wondered what informed that decision. And I had a lot of time to think about it over the last few years. And it's essentially the fact that you are situated in Johannesburg, no criticism to that, but you depend heavily on what's written in the media. Hence the question is the role of the media in elections. Prof, may I inform you this evening that not only did we get one seat in our council, we got 3 seats. We became the 4th biggest party in this metro. You refer to the time when we want to invoke Section 12. The 4 parties that were supposed to be included in that Section 12 move was going to be the DA, the ANC, correct? Then the EFF, as well as the NA. But, Prof, here's the thing that you did not address in your earlier analysis of Nelson Mandela Bay. You did not address the administration. Yes, we are the political parties. I am not an engineer. Ladies and gentlemen present, I am not an engineer. All you do as a political party, you provide oversight. Now, the problem where this comes in where the oversight comes in is when you have an unstable administration. And now, if you ask me what is an administration, if I can educate you quickly, because the Prof didn't touch on it, is when you go from the city manager side down. Then you get us as politicians who are the mayor and so forth, down. All we do is we provide oversight and we say, go and fix those potholes, go and do your road markings, go and clean those drains. We do that. The problem you have is that with an unstable administration, there's nobody to hold accountable. A lot has happened since 2021. Let me just inform the Prof quickly why he made the statement that of the infighting and so forth in my party. He did allude to the fact that I'll be able to reply later on. Prof, in March of 2022, I was a councillor for 3 months. I was the speaker then. I wanted to mention this fact afterwards. Are you aware of the fact that you didn't mention the administration, are you aware of the fact that in that council meeting in March, you had a city manager elected by 57 councillors? The council did not correct. Ever since that day, and the reason why I know it, not only was I there, I was the speaker. And when I announced the outcome of that vote, I said, we are only 57 here. We've got a problem. The following morning, I wrote to the mayor. The then mayor was Mayor Eugene Johnson. And I wrote to her. I wrote as the Speaker of Council and as well as Councillor Truan from the Good Party wrote, said that you cannot appoint the city manager. The following week, I called another council meeting to rescind that decision.
Yes, as you land,
As I
Deputy
land,
Mayor.
to rescind that decision. We went to court many times, and every time I won. I won. But the city manager just refused. Up until today, it is going to come out. Prof, right now I'm standing trial in the Commercial Crimes Court because of fighting corruption here in this municipality. You don't read it. Your media does not report on it. I'm encouraging you. I'm encouraging you because you are very, very, very influential, not only in this metro, but nationally, to hear what is really going on in this metro. I've applied via my attorneys to televise, and I want to encourage the youngsters, please follow my trial. Then you will hear the truth, not what you read in the media.
Thank you very much.
Pro a certain party.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, the last one.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Babalo. My name is Babalo. Oh, okay. It looks like I will follow in the footsteps of the former speaker here. My question will be directed to Professor Lekiana. As he was alluding on what the mayor, whatever, in here in Gqeberha, is it correct to actually to align the activity of the metro with a particular person, or are they all responsible for it? Because he kept on, talking about the mayor. Yes, we know, we hear these things and all of that. But is it her and her capacity as a person to put the metro where it is today? That's my question there. And then my other follow-up question on that, keep on speaking about politicians. Can politicians really deliver? Which is what he was about. Do they have the capacity to deliver? And they don't. When it comes to Mqubaka Prof again, it comes with cost. There's money. There's what? What is the real purpose? Where do they get the money to form this political party? And what is the purpose? So we need to look at a broader and not just look at Mquba. Who is there? Who wants to destabilize the country? Who wants? Because is there anybody who doesn't want us to prosper? That let us be better than we were yesterday, unless somebody is actually on the other side wanting to destroy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to allow the speakers to respond, and then I'll come to my left. Just briefly each.
I still have interest. Thank you very, very much. Trust, turnout, and turmoil. I think that is the big question for 2026, isn't it? Trust, turnout, or turmoil. You know, and I think when we listen to the narratives and we listen to the stories that people tell of their democratic disappointments over the last 30 years, that very often gets washed over around, look at what we have achieved. I think it's also important to remember that I reference the Constitution specifically because the Constitution held the dream of the type of just society we want to see. So ultimately, if I had my way, if I had a genie lamp and I could rub it right now and a political genie comes out and says, what would you want? I would say I would like a system of trust. However, coupled with that, also a political culture within political parties that will look at all factors that can affect the deficits in trust, and that includes the politico-administrative interface. And that instability is also something that undermines achieving that dream of 94, if you will, right? Of the new world being struggling to be born.
Thank you. Hey, Prof, I didn't get that first question from that young, from that young gentleman with the white T-shirt.
Give him a mic, and then please don't bring it too close to your mouth.
Can a voting system be technically secure but still be distrusted by the public? If yes, why?
Okay, got it now. All right. A lot about democracy and the public space is linked to perception, right? So it can be secure, as you use the word, right? But a lot around it is around the perceptive and the credibility, you know? When we speak about credibility, we speak about trust, right? Do people really trust the democratic system? Do people really relate to it? Do people think that this system is a system that is authentic and that they can relate with? So I'm saying a lot about it can be interrupted around how people view democracy, voting, and all of that. So it can be secure, but a lot about it is linked to perception and public opinion around that matter. So I've captured your question now. And I think there's no other question really directed to me, but I do think that, when we speak about oversight, right, correct, Deputy Mayor, administration is critical in the success and failure of municipalities. But we can't really remove politicians from administration because part of that oversight responsibility is to oversight over administration, right? So the oversight responsibility is to ask administrators, Kanti, what is it that you're doing, right? So it's a system that works together. But there is a separation, but I don't want us to void the accountability of politicians in relation to administration, because that oversight applies even in administration, right? And I think, can politicians really deliver? Hey, moms, I think it begs to be seen. But I do think, if the right accountability measures and the public institutions would play their role efficiently, I think there is a delivering capacity there. Thanks.
Let me start with this very last question that you've spoken to. This idea that politicians can't deliver. I'm puzzled by the very mention of that question. It's astounding. Because politicians take decisions. They make rules, they make policies, they monitor performance by bureaucrats. They decide whether or not you are doing your job or not. They come to meetings. They read the reports. They say, this one, we can't renew his contract or her contract because she's not performing. They readjust the budget. They have consequences on councillors that do not perform. They exact those consequences. So what is this thing that politicians are powerless? I mean, it's the most absurd thing I've heard tonight. The most absurd thing I've heard tonight. It takes the record, really. Because they have the power. The administrators are instructed by politicians. They have sanctions, powers of sanctions. If you don't perform, we won't renew. The AG says there is a possibility of corruption in this project. This project was not done properly, monies were not spent. Council has to initiate an investigation into that project. So they have powers to impose remedial measures on things that have gone wrong. So this idea that politicians are powerless is the most absurd thing I've heard, I think, this year. Gary, what I say what I say the way I say it, and I say it everywhere, and you will not find a statement where I say you will not get a seat. You will not find that. And I write a lot, I talk a lot. You will never find that because I was one of the first people who called out the ANC on what I called was chauvinism, the alienation of the colored votes. And I could foresee colored votes shifting away from the ANC. In fact, if I made any prediction, it was that you would get something. So what you're saying is false. You will not find it, frankly. You will not find it. If you do find it, I'll buy you a bottle of nice whiskey. And we'll drink it together, by the way. On coalitions, oh yes, Umkoba, I'm not sure if I understood that question, but in relation to the mayor, why the mayor? Why am I touching? Because, I mean, it helps to listen. Because my point was that the mayor is the face of government. She's the face of government. So what people know, the impression that they have of government, they form that impression based on the leaders of government. So if the mayor behaves in this way, that's the impression they have about that government. It's not a personal thing. I mean, I'm not raising things that she does in a private, at a home. These are things that she does as part of a public conduct that create an impression about the mayoralty. That's a basic, simple point. It's not a personal attack, but it's an impression. And then you have, in addition to that, and I made a point about drawing a distinction between the impression of a leader of government. And the only way we can make an impression of the leader of government is what we hear, because I'm not a friend, I can't call her and ask her to confess. We read about things that we hear in the media. And everybody else, and this is not rocket science, it's really elementary. Everybody else makes an impression of government based on public reports about government. That's simple, basic fact about life. What we hear about government is what we come to know about government. In this case, what the mayor does is what we come to know that the leader of government does. Then there are performance issues about the municipality. Those are separate things, and those, as I say, the politicians have a lot of power to make sure that the municipalities do what they are meant to do. Let me stop there. Gary,
Yes, Prof. Yes, Prof. We can always pick up later. We are running out of time. I need 3 questions from the side. I can take 4 max. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we are balancing the scale. But the scale is tilted in favor of this group. We are 1 person short. Any takers? Okay, there is 1 at the back there. So I had 3, and then the 4th one is there. Okay, over to you.
Hello. My name is Kolisile Ndongeni from Kariega. Perhaps my question is going to perhaps be a follow-up on what Prof has just mentioned in terms of accountability in relation to the mayor. Prof Ndlekyani. My confusion with regards to that, Prof, is because of the coalition government that we have. Because my belief is that when we vote for these parties, they do have different policies and manifestos. Then how do you make sure that, for instance, within that coalition, they do have what we call a shared vision? For instance, if you have one party, I think it's going to be easy, for instance, to say a certain person is not performing or a certain party is not performing. But when you have a coalition system, I think it is difficult to put a finger to a particular person, because that person is surrounded by other parties that are also having some interest in terms of the governance.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Then my second question and my last question is in relation to the role of the other community structures in the governance at a local government level. For instance, we are mentioning political parties, but the community is not only made up of political parties. Then how do we make sure that, for instance, other community structures are having a role to play within the governance or within the government at a local sphere? I'm not sure whether it is catered by the Constitution in terms of making sure that everybody has got a role to play within the governance at a local level.
Yeah, thank you. That question was powerful. We could even hear the men upstairs sending a message.
Oh yes, finally. Thank you very much, Prof, and the 2 professors, and also our Miss Che there, smiling very beautifully this evening. We need to allude the difference between bureaucracy and the lateral governance. And we need to, at a sphere, define what is governance at some point. Because some of us, we seem not to understand the term governance. Governance may be at a local level and also at a provincial level and at a national level. Now, I want to come also to my question that why do we always blame political parties at a certain point? Instead, that in governance, there is a constitution that is propelled there. Why don't we go and blame that section and then section Banban says that, sections Banban says that? Why don't we blame also certain individuals instead of blaming that particular political party? Because let me take an example, one example of the ANC. The ANC is bleeding each and every now and then because of blames of one individualistic person. And number two, I would like to come to Prof. Kotsi in what she raised in terms of the 23% in 2021 and 2022 of people who enjoy the democratic rights of democracy. And also the people who don't enjoy the democracy, the democratic rights of democracy. What do those people entail to enjoy? Do they enjoy dictatorship or do they enjoy apartheid governance laws?
Noted,
So,
noted,
thank you very
Chief.
much.
Noted. Thank you. Last but one. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, my people. My name is Atumile Jonas. I'll be talking on behalf of the ANC. ANC was a party of food givers to our people. Now the ANC, it's a party of criminals. We're gonna blame the ANC, but the main issue is the people who are under the ANC. Because if ever the ANC could fall and the DA become our leaders, that's where we're gonna lose it. Because the ANC have the flag of the ANC have a colors, 3 colors, and the logo of a black hand and a weapon that is called umkhondo. When we lose the ANC, that's where we lose our home, because we are going to become slaves of our own country. Because the moment the ANC falls down, the DA is going to be, they're going to act as the beasts. They're going to stand, they won't lose any chance. They're going to make sure that whatever they have in their hand, they're going to make it, they're going to dominate whatever they want. ANC is falling because of the people who are under the ANC.
Okay, got your point. Thank you very much. There was a last hand at the far back.
Good evening. My name is Nomazima Nkosi. I've got a question, I think, for each of the panelists. I'll start with Prof. Kotsa. I was at a previous dialogue, and one of the speakers there said that the ANC is not behaving like a party that wants to remain in power or a party that wants to win an outright election, saying that it still has the leaders that dropped the party from a 60% plus, took it all the way to 41%. So I'd just like to hear maybe your response to that. Do you think that the ANC broadly in the country is behaving as a party that wants to be a leader of society? And then to Uyandisa. So I have a colleague who said, Ngizwe Mchunu and Phakela Umthakathi are the useful tools of this destabilization project. And the state's public voice has seriously been dwarfed by everything. I think we saw earlier this week Panyaza Lesufi trying to jump into that debate. What do you think of that statement that the state's voice has sort of been dwarfed by the two gentlemen leading this destabilization project, as it's been termed? And then, Prof, I'd just like your reflection on the recent appearance of Nelson Mandela Bay in front of Parliament's Cocktail Committee. The chairperson, Zweli Mkhize, is not free of scandal. But as you've mentioned, you've seen him taking the sort of ethical charge in terms of the Metro's performance capacity levels. But at a party level, he is of the same party as the mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay, but I don't think there's been a stronger opponent within that setting to the mayor. Politically speaking, what does this mean for the ANC in Nelson Mandela Bay? Because post those appearances before Parliament, the party as a whole, I think it's taken a knock already on the many knocks that it's taken, but it's taken a knock. And certainly at a party level, I would have assumed there may have been prior discussions because it is a crucial time for the ANC and it's been viewed as a party without capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A round of applause. I'm going to give my speakers 1 minute, maximum 2 minutes to respond to the questions, and then we call it a day. Let's start from Prof and then come this way. Prof and Tatiana, there's a mic. And I'm timing them.
All right, how's that? Okay, perfect. Yes, correct. In a coalition, it does tend to become a bit tricky because you have multiple actors, but there is a majority party that allocates seats, who does what. And so for the priority issues, I don't think anyone can tell us that the biggest party can't quite determine who should get what, especially prioritize the key areas of government. So I don't really buy this thing that, well, you can't tell anybody what to do. The point is, you can influence them. You can threaten them with exclusion from their coalition if they don't do what they want to do and get them replaced by someone else, or you can take that portfolio to yourself as the leading party of the coalition. It's being in a coalition is not entirely blameless. You can attach blame and make sure that things do get done. On the ANC and DA slaves and all that stuff, I mean, this romanticization of the ANC. You started off quite well, saying, being very critical of the ANC, and you should be critical of the ANC. But being critical of the ANC doesn't mean that you have to denigrate the DA. You can call the DA whatever you want to call them, but at least evaluate their performance credibly. The DA stints here in this metro as government have been far better than the ANC in the coalition age. The DA has spent their budget. I speak here as a scholar. I have studied these things. Even ANC people will tell you, the DA always spent their budget. When Trollip came in, he never fired any black people. He retained black staff. And because the DA spent their budget, they even got more money from Treasury, and the ANC has hardly spent their budget. So the idea of slavery, and he won't be velapi. And he won't by velapi, this idea of slavery, based purely on the performance of the DA. Never mind that they may be white. I'm not even sure if that's a crime. But if we evaluate them purely on their performance, then we have to come to one conclusion, that in this age of coalitions, the DA has been a far better leading party in coalition, and that's a fact. And it doesn't depend on whether you like it or not, it's just a fact.
An individual versus the party, should we blame individuals or should we blame the party? That was one of the questions, Prof.
I missed that. I haven't thought about the answer to that. But let me come to the Mkhize thing. You would expect, I mean, the answer is probably too long there, and it's too long there. There have been too many mishaps. And at some point, you would have expected. Mkhize has his own issues, but in this case, he has acquainted himself quite well. But the conduct of the mayor has been shambolic. and you would have expected Kalata House or Lutuli House to intervene. Tomorrow we'll hear of the responses that they want, whether she will provide those responses or not. But you would have expected at some point that someone would put an end to the circus. It's a circus. Thanks.
Okay. I think, let me take why do we blame the political party versus the constitution? Why do we blame the political party instead of the individual in the party? I think I'll take this one. Because when you are a political party that avails itself to contest elections, you are then fully subscribing to implementing the constitution, right? Meaning that you hold the responsibility to make sure that you embody and implement the values and the constitutional requirements of the constitution. So we can't not blame you as a political party is my point, right? Because by virtue of availing yourself to contest the elections, you have to then subscribe and have a responsibility to implement. Why blame the political party versus the individual? The political party is the one that deploys and sends and says, Zbanbani, go and serve in government on behalf of the African National Congress, for example, right? So we can't not then attach a level of responsibility to the political party because they have then said, we trust this person to go represent us, and if they're not, then they must. Yeah. And then, Nomazima at the back, and gives them all of, the issues that it's muffled the voice of the state. I think that generally what we're seeing, Prof. is the fact that masses have displayed, or the public has displayed, the ability to mobilize themselves outside of political parties. Now, we need to start thinking about what then that means, right? If people can really sustainably mobilize themselves without being convened by a DA or an EFF or the ANC or whatever, right? That means that there's a level of an uncoordinated mass that has the potential to really threaten the traditional systems of what we call democracy. So I think that's a thought, and then, it worries me a little bit. I think let me stop there for now. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And just a reminder, I have interest. I'm going to work my way from the bottom up, if that's okay. So the ANC is not behaving like a party that wants to remain in power, was the question, and what my views are on that. And I think that on the balance of scale, we do need to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? That's what it boils down to. So when we say that the ANC is not a party that behaves like it wants to stay in power, I would like to challenge that a little bit and say, yeah, but if you look at don't massacre me, if you look at the GNU narrative, for example, if you look at the night the results were announced, the uncertainty of the markets, the fear, the instability,